Experience to Impact, Reflections on Making the Most of International Exchanges. Global Leadership Exchange.
So fantastic to have all of you with us. Thank you, Charlie, Cameron and Linda for joining us. We're really keen to hear your reflections on making the most of kind of international exchanges and how that's trickled out for you as leaders within Scotland and for your broader organisational work. So thank you for joining us for this conversation. I'm really keen to start with Charlie and just kind of an opening question. When you first got involved with GLE, or I think it was back when we were still IDL, and I believe your first exchange was the Washington DC exchange in 2019. So I'm curious, as we start this conversation, what was happening in your work before you came to that exchange?
Well, my involvement actually, Aisling, goes back to, I think it was 2008 that IIMHL was in Edinburgh. And so I was involved at that point when I worked at the Scottish Association for Mental Health. So the organisation already came with credibility and a pedigree for myself. It was very much about the Italian work that was happening in terms of mental health modernisation, and it was really, really exciting. I then drifted off in my career, as you're wont to do, for the next 10 years or so, and had just got the job at the Scottish Commission for People with Learning Disabilities in 2019, when I got a phone call from Donna Bell at the Scottish Government saying, we're wanting to join IIDL, the GLAG-D, and I'd really like you to come along with me to Washington. Are you up for it? And I was like, well, of course I'm up for it. That sounds absolutely incredible. The organisation itself was going through a lot of change, having just recruited a new chief executive. We were also dealing with a huge amount of ongoing change in the lives of people with learning disabilities. That's the language we use in Scotland, and I know it varies across the world. But an understanding that their lives were far from the lives that they would choose in terms of employment, education, in terms of health, in terms of early mortality. Every indicator we had for the lives of people with learning disabilities was really, truly shocking. And so I went to Washington really with that sense of, well, what else is the world doing? And we were so lucky in that process that Aaron Phillips, who was Obama's disability lead, basically, and had done a massive amount of work in terms of disability capacity building and process and systems development, that we spent 2 days with them, Aisling. That's where I met you and met Eddie. And it was just a fabulous learning experience. We met Tia as well, an individual human rights defender and activist who really transformed my view of what was possible. But the big understanding I took away from that was you have to capacity build. You can't just turn around to people who live lives in the margins, and in this instance, it was people with learning disabilities, and expect them to be able to join in the world as I knew it, and the world I was part of. There had to be a capacity building programme. So I'm probably running on, Aisling, but that kind of gets me to Washington. Washington was an incredible experience. The learning was really profound. The sense that you can, over time, bring change was really fundamentally important.
Absolutely. And it leads nicely into my second question, which was really if there were any moments that particularly shifted your perspective or your approach to the work. And you've highlighted that capacity building, that understanding that change is possible, but it's going to take some time. Are there any other key things you'd like to highlight?
Well, the cultural competence of the organisation, I think, is really fundamentally important. And we'd experienced nothing like it in Scotland. You know, in terms of, I used to joke about coming to meetings and come away with post-colonial guilt, you know, in terms of the experience that I was being met with from many of the post-colonial nations. What we had imported, you know, and really negatively impacting on people's lives, experiences, etc. over time. So there was a huge amount of learning there, and how you then engage with that diversity in your country in the most creative and wonderful and just inclusive ways. So that was another real takeaway for me as well. I think the other big thing that happened in the early days of my engagement with, and I do struggle with GLAG-D and all the rest, but IIDL was, it's just age and time and having been involved for so long, but was the COVID experiences. We went into lockdown. So only 6 months after Washington, we then went into lockdown. And I really thank IIDL, IIMHL and GLE for what they brought to me as a chief executive. So here was a chief executive sitting in a small voluntary organisation. That's part of the beauty of SCLD. We're not a government organisation. We're arm's length from government. We're NGO. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? We'd just gone into lockdown. We got onto Teams in a week because luckily we'd had the foresight to put it on our computers. I didn't know it was there. But actually, I remember GLE organised a webinar with the two guys who'd led the crisis response for Hurricane Katrina. And that was a pivotal moment in my career. Never mind anything that in the 38 years I've been working, that hour and a half spent listening to their experience changed the way I operated, and changed the way I operated in the context of a COVID lockdown, which in Scotland went on for 2 years. So then I was trying to implement the learning from Washington in that COVID context, in that lockdown context, and that again had to change. So everything went online. Taking people with learning disabilities online was a big challenge because many of them didn't have any Wi-Fi access or IT or, Zoom, Linda. I mean, Zoom, we have guides, easy to guides on how to use Zoom. There was so much of our life was spent really trying to capacity build again there. So those first 2 years in terms of the 2019-2020 were absolutely pivotal. But the session on the post-COVID experience based on Hurricane Katrina, fundamentally important. And I projecting in and listening to what Steve was saying and Brian was saying, projecting into the future, I think that's what GLE could be really trying to focus. What is this? How do we manage in this global crisis? How do we keep going? How do we keep that focus on what can change, Steve? Absolutely. And exploring that is just because there's nowhere else that you get that opportunity. That was how I found it.
Oh, thank you.
Pause there, actually.
Yeah, it's a great pause, because we really wanted to then start exploring, well, what did you do after the exchange, and what did you start to see happen as a result? And you started to touch on some of those focuses, but also some of the challenges. And we'd love to bring in Cameron and Linda as well to kind of talk about their experience of this change. So were there particular focuses that you came back to SCLD wanting to start to implement?
So absolutely, and that it's called Our Future Leaders. That we designed a course, a capacity building course for people with learning disabilities, because largely they'd missed out in education because of the systemic abuses they experience in education. And so we really wanted to try and invest our resource in their capacity building. So we designed Our Future Leaders with our wonderful partners at Inspire in Scotland, which is another NGO and funder. And we ran 5 cohorts in the first 4 years, I think it was, of Our Future Leaders. And that was very much about building on all the emerging leadership work. So Our Future Leaders was really pivotal. And the other bit was our development of our Include for Good change program within the organisation, where we recruited and employed 10 rapporteurs, people with learning disabilities, who we provided human rights training and capacity building training so that they then could lead the change for themselves. And that co-production approach very much came from Washington as well. So those were probably the two most profound ways that I deliberately tried to change what we delivered, but as well as that, I had to change how I operated because we were in this lockdown experience.
Thank you very
Cameron,
much.
Linda, come in.
Yeah, I wondered, Cameron, would you like to speak to the way that those programs started to develop in your experience through that?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks very much, Aisling and Vivi. Definitely. We bought. I'm going to go on to that in a wee second, but I wanted to touch base on a couple of things leading up to this exchange that we've just had, because it was a big exchange. It was my first time ever second time at an in-person event, and I just wanted to say that SLD supported GLE with the planning of the Emerging Leaders match this year as well. And this had a focus on emerging leaders. I was also involved in planning this match, but it's also included emerging leaders with lived experience of learning disability. And that's very important because of everything that we do at SLD, it's involving people with learning disabilities. But we wanted to try and figure out exactly how we would do that exactly. We also created the Easy Read programme and information to support the match event, and that was very well. I think that went down really well, Aisling, as well, at the event itself. And Vivi, you were there as well, and I think it went down really well as well. Rosie, who was one of our Include for Good colleagues, attended the match event and conference with me. So bringing that lived experience to the conference itself, which was a fantastic opportunity as well. And we met new colleagues from all over the world, and I've been keeping in touch with them as well. Aisling, I've just got a little bit more to go with that, if you don't mind, as well.
Please.
So at the conference itself, I was invited to be a panel member on the stage, which was the Youth Perspectives on Flourishing and Wellbeing panel. I spoke about the barriers around employment that young people with learning disabilities face in Scotland, and I told the audience about Scots Commission for People with Learning Disabilities active and connected included resources, which supports community engagement. We can also drop a link to some of the stuff in the chat after we've spoken here as well. I was also fortunate with Charlie that we got to meet Queen Maxima, and that was an honour to meet with her. And every single meeting, I like to try to slip this in as well. I let her know that I've been having input into Effective Leaders as well, and I bought my own house. She said the Netherlands had a long way to go. Now, next question probably is what did we do with that learning? So we went there, we had a great time, but what did we do afterwards as well? We were honoured to be able to get some funding to support our attendance in Utrecht, and as part of that we held a webinar to share our experience and learning for the week. I'm now proud to say that that video recording is now available, so again I can drop that in the chat and it can probably go into the next e-bulletin as well. The webinar was led by Rosie and myself and GLE colleagues. I know that Aisling, you came to speak about your lived experience there as well. And some of the learning from the actual exchange as well was that I was absolutely shocked that the employment rate of people with learning disabilities across the world is the same as Scotland. And you're sitting in 2025, so you just think back many years as well. And I've also learned that people still in institutions, and they earn very little money as well by living in these institutions as well. And I can't remember what session I went to, but I went to a session and there was a young man from Ireland who spoke about his experience about institutions as well, and it was a very eye opener for us as well. And the final thing I'm going to say just now is that I also, in the follow-up, have been speaking to Anne Billadu, and who, folks that don't know, Anne is Chief Exec at the KW Habilitation in Kitchener, Canada. And we've been sharing some information about different employment programmes that we have in Scotland and Canada, and sharing the learning about what works for people with learning disabilities to find employment and maintain a job and progress in their careers. So that's all that I want to say. I think Linda had a couple of other follow-ups as well that we had done as well. So you can see that there's been a lot of follow-ups from the conference as well. And if it hadn't been for us attending, we wouldn't have these connections. So Linda.
How do I follow you two? I don't know. But maybe if I can pick up just on a couple of things. So I remember the day that Charlie came back from Washington, you know, and said, right, we need to do something around leadership. And the Our Future Leaders course has just undergone a revamp, and it has been co-designed by graduates who have completed the course, and that's just been piloted. So people with learning disabilities who graduated have now improved the Our Future Leaders offer. So that was a great outcome. And we also had a theme for Scottish Learning Disability Week on leadership as a consequence as well. So there were lots of ways, you know, that we really embraced the theme of leadership in the organisation. Coming back to Utrecht, well, I was just a stand-in in Utrecht. I was called in at the last minute, and I was very grateful to have the opportunity to be alongside Cameron and Rosie throughout the match events and at the conference itself. And we never miss an opportunity to network and chat to people, and one of the great outcomes was going all the way to Utrecht to meet somebody important from Scotland, but we did, Rosie met with Stephen Gallagher, who's the Director of Mental Health in Scotland, and invited him to come and meet the Include for Good rapporteurs. That was such an important landmark, and Stephen was as good as his word. He came along, he's met all the rapporteurs. They really held him to account, because that was at the time when the Learning Disability, Autism and Neurodivergence Bill, and people had spent lots of time on that consultation and responding, and then it wasn't in the programme for government. So people were really despondent about that, and give Stephen his due, he's not here tonight, you know, he came, you know, he listened, and he responded and agreed to come back. He's coming back again to meet the rapporteurs in May. But that shows that level of leadership, you know, and the power that the rapporteurs, all people with learning disabilities, have to call the great and good to account. And that was really, I think, the inception of Include for Good, you know, the real aim. But we've also, as Cameron said, Charlie invited Anne Bilodeau over, and she spent a few days with us. And as part of that, she joined us at the Positive Behaviour Support Community of Practice meeting. And she went away and she said, I'm going to follow up. That was great. I want to learn more about how you've established this group, how it works. We followed up with Anne, and she's such a great networker. We got an invitation to talk to the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services at the Ontario Government a couple of weeks ago, and we held a webinar just to really share our experiences of setting up the PBS Community of Practice. It's funded by Scottish Government, facilitated by SCLD, but has a real coalition of the willing around us. And one of the big things that we've done is create a learning resource for understanding PBS, and that was a focus of our discussions with our colleagues in Ontario. So we shared all of those resources with them, and that was just wonderful. So the threads keep going, you know, from Ontario. But I think one of the great things for me was that opportunity to meet people from other countries. And I see that Ruby's here as well tonight. It's great to see you. And just learn and just really soak up that learning. And Tia, who we met from TASH, you know, I think she showed our emerging leaders that we were in Utrecht a different way to do things, you know, and how to challenge, you know, and how to protest, you know, which is something that Scottish people don't do very well. So it was really interesting. And we also met with Mel from the States, and Mel worked with people with learning disabilities coming out of long-stay learning disability institutions, but she had a really fascinating role in that she followed people for the long term, do you know, to find out, you know, how good is your life? Do you know, you think we've done a good job to this point, but actually how good is your life, do you know, over time. So it was just really, the learning was absolutely a huge. So yeah, it was great. And I think Rosie, do you know, who I buddied for the week, do you know, also got such a lot, do you know, from it, you know, so it was a great opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing these reflections with us and sharing the story. I'm going to open up for questions, just to just flag that so that people have a chance to think of any questions or anything they'd like you to draw out further. While they do that, I just want to highlight probably three kind of key things that have jumped out at me from listening to these rich reflections. So one is, it's a great example again of the ripple effects of leadership. So Donna invites Charlie in to be part of something. Charlie invites a broader group to be part of it, which enables others to invite a broader group to be part of it. And it's a really good demonstration of that one act of leadership of invitation can really help to build that coalition and that movement. And again, I think that that approach that SCLD has taken to partnership. So partnering with Inspiring Scotland to develop resources, partnering with GLE to share your learning with us and develop things like Easy Read. For the first time, we had resources for a match available in Easy Read, and it was thanks to our partnership with SCLD. And then finally, just thinking about that, change takes time, but wow, in 5 years from 2019 from that exchange in 2019 to that exchange in 2024, that's a lot of positive change, and just want to take a minute to kind of celebrate the leadership and the collective effort that it takes to get to such a different experience. So what a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you for sharing some of the pillars that also helped you to build to that stage. Let me open up. I'm just going to change the settings so we can see everyone again. Are there any questions? And if you want to put your hand up so we can go in a bit of an order.
Aisling, I'm going to, there's Steve coming in, so I'm going before Steve this time. The other ripple effect, sorry, that I hadn't mentioned was the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA plus Leadership Collaborative, and I'm actually still involved in that, although not through my work, although you could argue it is. I'm now at the Human Rights Consortium for Scotland, but the leadership aspects just keep growing and growing. It's like the ever-increasing circles of a pebble dropped in a pond. I thought that was a great point, and certainly with the Two-Spirit work, it's really fascinating. Again, culturally different as well, and no other organisation that I know globally is touching that. So, I mean, I'm hearing stories of files being deleted with the word gay in it. Yeah. So, I mean, whether that's true or not, but those are the kind of aspects. And here's an organisation saying, no, head up, keep going. It's really fabulous.
Charlie, Steve.
Thanks, Aisling. I suppose a reflection and then a question. In a sense, often people say to me, what's the impact of GLE? What's the added value? And if you didn't get a sense of that over the last 10 or 15 minutes, then Charlie, I'll have the money back. I think it is just such a powerful set of reflections about how our organisation seeks to work and engage people in lots of different levels, and how we define leadership. So we've all got titles, we've all got badges that we wear. Some of those are professional and some of those are personal. But one of the proudest things that I observed during the Utrecht experience was Cameron meeting Queen Maxima and very proudly telling her that he'd just bought his house, and the look of delight on her face. There was a connection between the two of you around that particular issue. And if I was thinking back to when I first met Cameron online, and the change in his demeanor and his confidence and his ability and skills driven through Charlie's support and that of colleagues in SCLD and elsewhere, that's what we're about. That's what we're about. And I just wanted to ask Charlie and Cameron, what more do you think we could do to ensure that people like you, Cameron, get more opportunities to lead and contribute to thinking about what is needed and what needs to change and be better? How can we as an organisation help that to happen?
Cameron, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, that's a very hard question. I think as well, because there's people jumping from the rooftops with the lived experience that I have. So I'm talking about other people who work in SLD, other people who are members of the rapporteurs who would jump at the opportunity to go to something like this as well. And I think there was a lot of and external organisations that we work with. There's lots of people that will be able to go and tell their personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of them have been, so some of them have written articles, have got themselves into the paper, have got themselves into posting things online, and some of them have even I use Heather Gilchrist, for example. So Heather is a girl who works at Enable Scotland. She got interviewed about annual health checks and care charges by a national TV studio in Scotland as well. And the confidence that people see as well is unbelievable. I think just in terms of like going back to that GLE, something that I also never mentioned is with Clinton, I'm sat on the GLE Lived Experience Network now as well. So again, that's improving my lived experience a little bit more. But I think the answer to your question, Steve, I don't really know, because it's so hard with the limited budgets that we've got to do something like this again. And I think I was honoured to be invited. I was honoured to meet the Queen. I was also honoured to be invited to speak on stage. But that was part of my day job as well. So if I was to be invited as a normal individual person with a learning disability, I think it would probably feel a little bit different as well. But Charlie, I don't know if you've got anything else to kind of add to that, or if that kind of answers your question, Steve.
Well, it does, Cameron. It's really profound what you're saying as well. And I think all of it's about creating opportunities for people to come to meetings, to be part of these meetings, to sit and work together. I mean, one of the things that you and I really try to do is develop that ongoing partnership in terms of the GLAG-D as well. And I think that's the fundamental thing that starts to make the change happen. That I'm here in many ways as a facilitator rather than, holding the space of my own. This is about facilitating engagement and involvement. So really, I think the skills building element, I think the sharing, and I think using Zoom as much as we possibly can. I love face-to-face work. Listen, I absolutely adore it. But actually, in these times of financial crisis as well that we face, that being as flexible as we can be, using Zoom, working together, and just keep growing those circles. The work that's happening in Canada, I hadn't heard. It's absolutely amazing. That's brilliant, folks. So that's great. That's how it grows. But Cameron, it is about partnership, I think. Co-production is in every level and stage of the work we do.
Yeah, and I think it's because we're kind of new to that co-production bit as well, and I think certainly the rapporteurs now are trying to co-produce more. They're trying to co-produce with other organisations. They're trying to co-produce, but again, it's relatively new to us as well, so we might not have all the answers as well. But obviously, we do have some. So yeah.
Fantastic comments, and I think it highlights that creating opportunities isn't enough. It's also about how do you support people to be able to thrive and succeed in that opportunity. So I think that's one of the lessons we kind of drew out together between GLE and SCLD in the Emerging Leaders principles. And I love that idea of being a facilitator, Charlie, that you've just highlighted as well. Ross, let's invite you in.
Yeah, and thanks to Cameron, to Charlie and Linda. I'd like to know more about the Future Leaders Program. It's certainly something we've been trying to advance here, and it reminded me that just yesterday, for the first time, a group of self-advocates, as we call them, and they call themselves, got to meet the Premier of the province of British Columbia, and to have a meeting with him to discuss what their priorities were, what they thought on different issues. And the Premier asked them questions of importance. And they later got introduced in the legislature by the minister in front of all the MLAs from across the province. And when they called me at the end of the day, they were just on cloud nine. Like they were so excited to be heard and be heard at such high levels. And they got to meet deputy ministers, parliamentary secretaries. Like we made them work for a day and a half. They just met a lot of people, but it's very different than having me meet with them and to hear straight from the people. And what we've been trying to say in BC is that there's always the importance of family voice, but not as a replacement for the individual's voice. And that's what they got to experience the other day. So thanks for that. And just the presentation taught me the value of focus, right? Because I know for me, there's so many things that we're trying to protect or advance, and we can get lost in that and lost in the weight of the obligations of all those things. But what you're saying is pick something and run with it and take it to its end point. And that's very inspiring to me. So thanks so much for
that. Ross, absolutely. Linda, can I jump in? I have two very quick points. One is actually part of the way of working for Include for Good, the rapporteurs, was that they wouldn't go to other people's meetings, that people had to come to them. Because I think in Scotland you can make a career out of going to other people's meetings. So it really was about pulling back the power. And Include for Good, mine was the idea, the concept. Linda was the person that had to make it happen. It's really yours now in terms of where it is. Linda, do you want to come in and say more?
So I would say that Include for Good belongs to the rapporteurs, and the way that we ran with the initial concept was to work with what we called 6 trusted advisors to share the idea, behind Include for Good. Our chair of our board, and Charlie at the time had this idea. So we worked with 6 trusted advisors to begin to scope that out. And then we ran a recruitment for our rapporteurs with interviews. And then they were appointed in their roles. And that was really important that they were recruited first, because we needed a programme lead to support the rapporteurs and the work that they're doing, but it was really important that they interviewed and chose who that lead was going to be. And it was somebody who absolutely related so well. And it was done, during COVID. And she brought our walking boots, and she had a whole host of props, and just talked their language, so they knew that this was the right person. This would be somebody who would be behind them, but not in that lead role. So that was quite important steps to establish the programme. And we've been, Include for Good, been running now for 2.5-3 years or so. And you've seen the huge difference you know, and just in terms of that capacity building, that confidence, that leadership. And Charlie spoke about creating platforms, you know, for people, you know, so they've gone to Parliament, you know, they've called people like NHS Education Scotland, Iona Colvin, who's Chief Social Worker, you know, colleagues like Stephen, you know, they have called them to meet in an office in Glasgow. And that's really important because it's their space, do you know, it has a changing places toilet, do you know, it's their space. So you're coming onto our ground, and that changes the dynamic too, and the holding to account. So, you know, here are the issues. Tell us you're in a position of power to change these issues. Tell us what you're going to do. But by the way, we're going to have you back to hear exactly what it is you've done to make the change that is required. So it's powerful to see, and that evolution in people's confidence over that time is absolutely amazing, you know, and their professionalism and their passion to make Scotland a better place for people with learning disabilities is evident, and they challenge you all the time. And I mean challenge in a really positive way, because they've made us think both at an individual level and at an organisational level about what is it we do, you know. So it is a great programme, and I'm sure they would come and talk to you at any time and tell you more.
Linda and Aisling, can I just quickly touch base on Ross's first point, which was about outfit to leaders as well? Just a couple of other updates on outfit to leaders. Now, Ross, we can certainly send you the video that got created for the 2022 Leadership Exchange when we done a presentation in Dublin for it, but it's recently been revamped, but it's also been delivered in person for the very first time. So we had an organisation in Scotland that was able to host, I think it was it up to 10 people with learning disabilities, and it was also co-delivered by somebody with lived experience as well. So we've took this a very, very long way from being online to, and the future of Outfit to Leaders is that we're trying to get it into colleges and universities as well. So we're trying to get the programme into colleges and universities as part of our curriculum, because each programme is about 12 sessions, I think. So and the only one for 2 hours. So yeah, so I wanted just to give a quick update on that. But what we can potentially do is we can pull together some videos from it, and we can send them to Aisling to send them to GLAG-D members if they're interested as well.
And maybe just what's important is this is a bit of a pilot with the new course, you know. So we're going to do 2 pilots. The second one will happen in the autumn, and then we'll do an evaluation, and then we need to regroup and plan exactly what those next steps are going to be. But yeah, great summary, Cameron.
Thank you all so much. I think that highlights another great pillar from this conversation, which is the progressive steps. So I loved Ross's point about having the focus, understanding what you're trying to get to, but let's start where we are. We'll start with an online course, and then we'll improve it, and then we'll improve it, and then we'll keep the ambition alive. So what a great note to finish on, and thank you all for sharing your time with us. Thank you, Charlie, Cameron, and Linda.
Visit www.gle.world for more information.